Okay, let's unpack this right away. I'm sitting here looking at my schedule, checking my watch,
Which is perfectly synchronized, I assume.
down to the exact second, yeah. And I still feel like I'm running late. It is just the rhythm of the modern world. We live by the clock, we die by the clock. But for today's deep dive, we are doing something totally different. We have a stack of research here that essentially suggests everything you and I know about time, and specifically the stars that supposedly govern it, might be completely wrong.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? You look at your watch to know where you are in the day. It gives you this false sense of control. But let me ask you something. If you stopped looking at that dial right now and just looked out the window of this coffee house, what would you actually see?
I mean, I see the street, I see people rushing to work, I see a little slice of the sky between those old buildings over there.
Exactly. You see the sky as it is right now. But here's where it gets really interesting for you listening at home. Imagine for a moment that you are holding a mirror. And you aren't using it to check your hair or to see if you have foam on your lip from your cappuccino. You are holding it up to reflect the entire universe.
Okay, I'm with you. A cosmic mirror. Like the old saying, as above, so below, right?
That is the idea. But the problem, and this is the absolute core of our deep dive today, is that the mirror most of the Western world has been using to look at the sky is correct. It's actually frozen in time.
Perfect on how.
It shows a reflection of where the stars used to be about 2,000 years ago, not where they are today.
See, that is a massive claim. You are talking about the split between Western astrology, which is what I read in the newspaper, what I have identified with my entire life, and Indian or Vedic astrology. And looking at the sources we have today, from the Mahakal series to the writings of Robert Svoboda, this isn't just some tiny rounding error. It is a fundamental split in reality.
It is the difference between navigating a city with a map drawn by a Roman emperor and navigating by actually looking at the terrain under your feet. Our mission today is to explain exactly why the sky has moved, why you might be a completely different sign than you think you are, and why Indian astrology, which is called Jyotish, claims to be the only system looking at the actual stars.
Okay, so let's get into the logic here. Because to me, the Western system makes perfect sense. It is rational. It is based on the seasons, right?
Yes, the seasons.
Aries begins on the first day of spring, the vernal equinox. That feels like a very solid anchor. It's grounded in the Earth's relationship to the sun, so why fix what isn't broken?
Well, it is grounded, yes, but it is grounded in the earth, not the heavens. This is where we really have to distinguish between the watch and the window. Western astrology uses what's called the tropical zodiac. Think of it like a watch that is permanently set to summertime.
Okay, a watch permanently on summertime. I'm listening.
It doesn't matter if it is actually pitch dark outside. If the watch says it is 7 p.m., you say it is 7 p.m. Western astrology is a seasonal calendar. It locks the 12 signs to the equinoxes. So Aries absolutely must be the first day of spring. It is a closed loop of seasonal measurement, not stellar observation.
And the Indian system does what instead?
The Indian system, the sidereal zodiac, is literally like looking out the window. If your watch says noon, but you look out the window and see the stars are in a completely different position, maybe it's actually dark or the sun hasn't risen yet, Indian astrology says hopala.
Hopala. Whoops.
Right, whoops. There is actually a star there. It adjusts the time to match the reality of the sky. It is a stellar calendar, not a seasonal one.
So you're saying the Western system essentially ignores the actual stars just to keep the calendar tidy?
Precisely. It prioritizes the season over the sky. And the scientific reason for this divergence is something called the precession of the equinoxes.
We have some notes on this from Jagannath Hora. It sounds like intense physics, but break it down for us without the math.
It is simple mechanics, really. The Earth spins like a top. And you know how a spinning top, as it starts to slow down, begins to wobble a little bit?
Sure, it traces a little circle in the air with the handle.
The Earth does exactly that. It isn't perfectly stable in space. It wobbles on its axis, and it takes about 26,000 years to make one full wobble.
That is a very slow wobble.
Very slow. But because of this wobble, the exact point where the sun rises on the first day of spring drifts backward against the backdrop of the stars.
Drifts backwards. Okay, let me make sure I have this straight. 2,000 years ago, when the Western system was codified, the sun actually did rise in the constellation of Aries on the first day of spring.
Yes. At that specific moment in history, the map and the territory matched perfectly. The watch and the window showed the exact same time, but the Earth has kept wobbling, the backdrop has kept moving. Today, on the first day of spring, the sun is not in Aries, it is in Pisces. and it is slowly moving toward Aquarius.
Hence the age of Aquarius everyone is always thinking about.
Exactly. But Western astrology still calls that point Aries. It completely ignores the wobble.
This actually brings up the moving bus analogy from our source material.
Yeah.
I found this super helpful to visualize the whole thing.
It is a great way to see it. Imagine you are sitting on a bus. That bus is the tropical Western zodiac. The bus represents the seasons. Inside the bus, the seats are bolted down. They are fixed. You are sitting in seat 1A. That never changes.
Right. As long as I'm on the bus, I'm just in seat 1A.
But if you look out the window, the scenery, the trees, the buildings was whizzing by.
And the trees are the stars.
Yes. Vedic astrology accounts for the movement of the bus. It calculates the exact mathematical difference between your fixed seat inside and the moving tree outside. In Sanskrit, this calculation is called Ayanamsa.
Ayanamsa.
It translates roughly to the portion of movement or the slippage. It is the mathematical correction that aligns the map back with the real stars. Western astrology ignores the slippage. Vedic astrology is absolutely obsessed with it.
Okay, so this has massive implications for, well, for me. For anyone listening who strongly identifies with their sign, if the Earth has moved and the signs have drifted backward.
Here is where it gets really interesting, and perhaps a bit shocking for the ego. If you strictly follow the stars using the sidereal system, everything shifts back by about 24 degrees.
Which means?
Which means if you think you are a Leo in the Western system, you are almost certainly a Cancer in the Vedic system. If you think you are a Libra, you are likely a Virgo.
Wait, that is a full-blown identity crisis? I have spent my whole life thinking I'm one thing. Bold, fiery, center of attention, and now you're telling me I'm actually watery and emotional? That kind of feels like a demotion.
I can see the panic setting in. It is very common when people first hear this, but let's look at the reassurance here. This isn't about one system being completely right and the other being totally wrong. It is about what layer of reality you are looking at.
You're going to have to explain that.
Yeah.
Because it feels like if the stars aren't actually there, the Western chart is just pure fiction.
Not fiction, meteorology. Think of the Western sign, your tropical sign, as your clothing.
My clothing. Okay.
It represents the season you were born in. It describes your weather, your mood, your outer personality, your social mask. If you were born in August, in the heat of summer, you have a Leo temperament regarding the season. You are sunny, warm, maybe a bit loud. That is your costume, and that is perfectly valid.
Okay, that actually makes sense. The season dictates the vibe. I'm wearing a summer outfit.
But the Indian sign, that is your DNA, it represents the actual magnetic energy of the star cluster you were born under. It describes your soul. The source text we have, plus 27 stars, minus 27 gods, is very explicit about this. It says, the stars are not the signs.
The stars are not the sign.
Exactly. The signs represent the solar movement, the seasons, but the stars represent the lunar movement, the soul.
So Western astrology characterizes my psychological shell, the way I interact with the world socially. But Indian astrology, Jyotish, is trying to get my karmic core.
You've got it. The Sanskrit word for sign is rasi, but the word for the star cluster is nakshatra. And nakshatra has this beautiful etymology. It literally means that which does not decay, or, alternatively, sky map. It is the permanent, unchanging structure of your consciousness.
That distinction, clothing versus DNA, actually really helps. It means I don't have to just throw away my Western horoscope. I just have to understand that it's describing the weather I'm walking through, not necessarily the person doing the walking.
Beautifully put. And this leads us to the biggest philosophical shift between the two systems. It is not just about where the planets are. It is about which planet is actually the boss.
Right, because in the West, it is all about the sun.
Yeah.
Whenever someone asks, what's your sign, they always mean, what is your sun sign?
Because the sun is the king. It is the ego, the head, the projected self. Western culture is incredibly solar. It is all about individual achievement, outward expression, how we shine in the world. We all want to be the center of the solar system.
But in the deep dive sources, specifically Light on Life by Robert Svoboda, it says that in India, you are your moon sign.
Yes. In India, if you ask someone their sign, they won't give you their sun sign. They will tell you their moon sign or their nakshatra. Because the moon chandra represents the mind, the manas. It is the feeling, the perception. It is the channel through which we drink life.
I love that phrase from the research. The moon is the channel through which we drink life. It sounds so much more intimate than just saying ego.
It connects back to the Sanskrit concept of graha, We usually translate graha as planet, but that is honestly a very lazy translation. Graha literally means the grasper or the seizer, like a cosmic influencer.
That sounds a bit aggressive, like a monster under the bed grabbing your ankle.
It is profound once you get it. Planets aren't just floating rocks out in space, they are cosmic forces that grab hold of your consciousness. And the moon is the primary receptor for all of it. Think of it this way. The sun is the engine of a car. It is the raw power, the vitality.
Okay, the engine makes the car go.
But the moon, the moon is the windshield.
The windshield.
And the driver behind it. If the windshield is dirty, if your moon is afflicted or you have a clouded perception, it really doesn't matter how powerful the engine is. It doesn't matter how strong your sun is. You will crash. You won't see where you're going, and you definitely won't enjoy the ride.
That creates a totally different priority. Western astrology basically asks, how much power do I have? But Indian astrology asks, how clear is my view?
Precisely. The source material on Mahakal talks about the great time swallowing everything. In that context, your ego, your sun is temporary, it burns out eventually. But your mind, your perception, your moon determines exactly how you experience that time while you have it. It determines if you suffer or if you find bliss.
So, shifting from Western to Vedic isn't just about shifting a few degrees backward in the zodiac. It is shifting from an egocentric view to a, well, what would you call a consciousness-centric view?
A soul-centric view.
Yeah.
And to really get to that soul, we have to go deeper than just the 12 signs. We have to talk about the Nakshatras.
The Nakshatras. This is the part of the research that honestly blew my mind. We are so used to dividing the sky into 12 slices of pizza: Aries, Taurus, Gemini. But you were saying that is just not enough detail.
It is way too broad. Saying I am a Leo is like saying I am European. It is true, but it is incredibly vague. Are you French? Are you German? Austrian? Are you rural or urban? The Nakshatras are the 27 lunar mansions. They are the specific street addresses.
The term in the notes was Mondhouse, Moonhouse, or Rastplatz, a resting place.
Yes. The zodiac is a circle of 360 degrees. The moon takes about 27 days to circle the Earth. So the ancient seers divided the sky into 27 specific sectors, one for each day of the moon's journey.
And the myth behind this is just fantastic. The moon, Soma, has 27 wives.
Soma is a bit of a playboy, cosmically speaking. He spends one night with each wife in her specific mansion, and as he visits each house, the mood completely changes. The energy of the day changes.
So these aren't just random mathematical divisions. They have distinct personalities.
Very distinct. The sources actually call them the eyes of Jyotish. Without them, astrology is blind. For example, let's take the sign of Aries again. In Western astrology, you are just Aries. You're aggressive, you start things, you're fiery. But in Vedic astrology, that slice of sky contains different nakshatras.
Right. The first one starts with Ashwini.
Ashwini is the horse's head. It translates to speed, healing, the physician. It is swift and helpful. But if you move just a little further into that exact same sign of Aries, you hit Parani.
The bearer.
Yes. The symbol is the yoni. It represents birth, but also immense struggle, heavy lifting, carrying a massive burden. So two people can both be Aries, but one is a swift healer under Ashwini, and the other is a struggling bearer of burdens under Bharani. The nakshatra provides the actual nuance.
It's the difference between saying I live in New York and saying I live on Fifth Avenue versus I live in the Bronx. It totally changes the lived experience.
Exactly. And this applies to your fundamental nature. If your moon is in a specific nakshatra, that is your operating system. It tells us not just what you do, but how you feel while you are doing it.
There was one nakshatra in the notes that stood out to me. Ardra, the storm.
Ah, Ardra. Located in the sign of Gemini. The symbol for it is a teardrop. It is ruled by Rudra, the howling, fierce form of Shiva.
That sounds incredibly intense. A teardrop. Who wants a teardrop as their cosmic symbol?
I know, it sounds tragic at first, but it represents the intense clarity that only comes after a storm. People with the moon in Ardra often have very tumultuous emotional lives. They cry, they storm, they break things down. But through that destruction, they wash away the dirt. They bring freshness. A Western Gemini is just labeled as communicative, but an Ardra native is communicating through the storm.
That is just so much more specific. It completely explains why two people of the exact same sign can be wildly different from each other.
It also completely explains compatibility. In India, matchmakers don't just look at the sun signs to see if people get along. They look deeply at the nakshatras. Do the moons get along? If my mind and your mind are vibrating at completely dissonant frequencies, it doesn't matter how good we look together on paper. We will drive each other crazy in a week.
It really is a system of micromanagement of the cosmos, but in the best possible way. It seems like the goal of Jyotish isn't just to predict the future, but to understand the texture of the present moment.
The texture of the present. That is a really lovely way to put it. The source, Jagannatha Hora, emphasizes that time is a living entity. It isn't just an empty container that things happen inside of. When you understand the nakshatra of the day, you know what the cosmic weather is. Is today a day for speed, like Ashwini? Is it a day for harsh action, like Harani? Or is it a day for deep nourishment?
It's like checking the forecast before you go sailing. You don't sail into a hurricane if you can help it.
And you don't plant delicate seeds on a day meant for destruction. This is where the practical magic really comes in. Western astrology often feels very psychological. Here are your personality traits. But Vedic astrology feels surgical. Here is the energy today, and here is exactly how you use it.
But I had to ask, just for you listening right now, you are probably sitting there, maybe checking your Western horoscope app on your phone, feeling a bit cheated. Like you've been reading the wrong map your whole life. You've been identifying with the wrong archetype. What do we do with that feeling?
You should feel expanded by it, not cheated. The Western map is still valid for the seasons of your life. It's valid for your social interactions. It is the clothing. And we all need clothes to navigate the world. But now you have an invitation to look deeper, to look at the DNA.
It is an invitation to take off the costume and look in the mirror, the real mirror.
The uncracked mirror, the window.
So as we wrap this deep dive up, we have gone from a broken watch stuck on summertime to a window looking out at the actual galaxy. We've realized our sign might just be a seasonal mood, while our soul is anchored to a very specific star. And we've learned that the moon, our mind and perception, is actually the one driving the car.
That is the whole journey, from the ego to the soul, from the watch to the window.
It is a lot to process, but it definitely changes how I'm going to look at the sky tonight. It makes it feel less like a mechanical clock and more like a living, breathing thing.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought from the Mahakal texts. It is something really profound to sit with in your quiet moments.
Let's hear it.
We spend so much energy obsessing over our sun sign. We worry about how we shine, how we are seen by others, what our legacy will be. But the Indian system asks a much quieter and honestly more dangerous question. What is the quality of your moon? What is the true quality of your mind? Because in the end, it is not what happens to you, the sun events, that matters. It is how you perceive, digest, and swallow time. That is the power of the moon.
How you swallow time. That is a powerful image to leave on.
So the next time someone casually asks you, what's your sign? Maybe you should pause for a second and ask yourself, do they mean my seasonal costume or my cosmic soul?
Now that is a deep dive. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.